My name is Sarah.
Sarah?
Yeah.
And how did you hear about this event?
I'm an MA student on campus, so I just saw the flyers around school.
And why'd you come?
I wanted to see what men's issues were defined as.
And what have you gathered?
Well, there was no definition of what a men's issue was. There was some discussion of men's place on boys and men's place on campuses. To borrow the words from the speaker, some of the issues seem to be getting a male center on every campus as the goal, as the defined goal. Some of the perspectives brought up were from divorced men or there were a lot of examples of boys that committed suicide and there were no alternatives for them. Some examples of custody. I thought custody was brought up a lot.
And what do you think? We'll hold on for the plane for 1 second.
Just writing that story right now.
Oh man, I think it's okay.
So after hearing the little bit that you heard, because I guess the lecture was kind of focused on men's groups versus men's rights movement.
Yeah.
So of the little bit that you heard about the men's rights movement, how do you feel about it?
Well, they were quite explicit as to not define it as men's rights, which I think is a really good move. That's in terms of a PR campaign. It's not wise to have a men's rights group. In terms of what men's issues were, what I took really big issue with was all of the examples provided. So, for example, the issue of male enrollment in university or college, particularly in America, this is where the examples were coming from. This was framed as entirely a gender issue, when in fact enrollment, I think, goes far deeper than gender. Enrollment goes to socioeconomics, it goes to the meritocracy, it goes to affirmative action. So there were a lot of issues that weren't addressed remotely coming from a doctor that were really troubling to me. It seems like just bad general social science, bad intellectual practices to suggest that enrollment is a gender issue.
So do you think maybe he's like picking and choosing which facts to share?
Absolutely. And of course, as anyone I suppose would, trying to promote their perspective, he's trying to promote these centers, but the examples were so incredibly invalid or insufficient, I suppose is a better word. They didn't address anything. They used gender as a tool to disproportionately show how men are left out, essentially, from issues which were never defined. I'm trying to think of another example. One that really struck me was that the keynote speaker spoke about afterwards, after this conference, there are going to be gentlemen cleaning up, because mostly those who clean up are janitors and they're men and they're young men. And I mean, that's just remarkable because maybe he's overlooking all of the housekeeping, which is, across any institution, hospitals, anything in the social services, which is remarkably, these low-wage jobs run a lot by women. There was talk about campus life and boys on campus life, but brief little snippets of an example of, a man working as a custodian, for example, and not in the least bit considering the context of minimum wage jobs and where women stand in relation to that.
I get the sense that you're a little frustrated with what you learned, or not what you learned, but what you heard.
I'm incredibly disappointed. If the goal is to get a man's center for the university, first of all, you know, and this was put on by a group called Men's Issues in Action or something like this, MIA. This is the group that got the keynote speaker, and they never once defined what the center would be for other than providing a space for men to talk about their issues. But I mean, before we get a project to support this, there was no discussion of what the issues were. There was no discussion of the potential for exclusion.
I can't miss that.
There was no discussion about
We'll go in court solidarity for
where the information is coming from for these examples. I thought there was a really big lack of due diligence in terms of the information being shared today. Also, I did a head count of the participants tonight. There were roughly 100 participants, a little more, a little less, because some people were walking in and out, of which I counted 19 female heads that I was able to identify from a corner, you know, walking up and down. 3 of them I know worked for one of the other institutions that was co-hosting this event, and another was a photographer. You know, so that leaves 15% of the participants were women, who, you know, who I would say were casted as anti-man, which I thought was a really unfair characterization of women in relation to man's issues, given that it's such a gendered event.
That's interesting that you did a head count.
Yeah, well, it was interesting in numbers. I was surprised. I was given, you know, the head counts in universities that this professor provided. There should be way more women. There should have relatively been way more women in the participants in the event, or at least just watching.
Do you think at a feminist event that it'd be mainly women and 15% men?
Do I think what?
At a feminist event, wouldn't it be predominantly women?
I would imagine men would feel really unwelcome there.
Are you a feminist?
This is an incredibly big question. It's a really big question. I could talk about this for 20 minutes, but this is a really big question in society, I would say, because it really divides people. There's a lot of judgment associated with this term, and I know there are big media scandals when women like Beyonce, for example, refuse to label themselves a feminist. And I've talked with some of my female friends about this, and I have chats with my friends, and we talk about, you know, what feminist means to you, and for a lot of people it means a judgment label. So if you say you're a feminist, you're not doing enough. You're a feminist, but you're wearing short shorts. You're a feminist, but you're not burning your bra. So I think in terms of defining myself as a feminist, I'm certainly for female empowerment in any respect. But for anyone who's going to impart judgment on that,
the labels.
I would be reluctant to defend that kind of a feminist label, but depending on how you define feminism, yeah.
So what sparked your interest to come here tonight? Because this is a fairly particular thing to have interest in. Not everyone wants to hear about it. So why did you? It seemed really absurd because the poster it advertised was
What do you have for dinner?
men's issues. It was the group. The group was men's issues, something like take action or something. And then underneath, the only thing that it said about the event was that men's enrollment is down to 33%. It's time to take action or something along these lines. So I thought that was just such an absurd way to take enrollment that, okay, I'm going to go and see what the crisis in in enrollment is from a men's issues perspective, which it really lacked in any elaboration of any kind of enrollment issue.
Are you familiar with the men's rights movement online, like the online community?
Not at all. I took extensive notes, but I especially wrote down the websites so that I could check them out and see what's going on there.
Yeah, A Voice for Men is the one that's kind of the most controversial, but also the largest growing men's rights community online. And the founder of the websites in there, Paul.
Okay.
And there's a lot of other websites, but that's probably
The more
biggest one,
controversial ones.
the most controversial. Yeah.
And I didn't come here with the idea to sort of label everybody as a male activist, because maybe that's not what people are here for, but the sense was, first of all, the atmosphere in which it began. There was a third-year student, Dylan, who presented, and he gave the house rules, and in so doing, completely, entirely condescended any protest action against this. In so promoting free speech, which was absolutely unnerving to me. It was incredible that he could suggest something like that. And then there was a speaker from the cafe team, and that's Center for Equality or something like this. I can't remember, but their acronym is CAFE, and Canadian Association for Equality. That's what they're called. And so then there was a short clip to promote what they work for, and there was a man who spoke, and he spoke about his experiences as a divorcee and losing and suicide of people he knew from similar experiences. And then the keynote spoke about basically campus life. Campus life for the everyday guy, but campus is an incredibly privileged space. So campus life was defined as difficult on a gendered basis. The space,
but I also think that a lot of people
the space for empowerment for men is based on privileged men on campus. According to this talk, there is a space. They're lobbying to get a space for the average men to talk about issues. When what is the average man? The average man is the university kid.
Okay, so you're saying that the kids on campus are already privileged in some ways compared to the average person.
There was, and not that there's something wrong with being able to benefit from a campus or to have a men's association, but I mean, there was just no acknowledgement whatsoever of any other social sphere other than gender. So we're gonna have a men's group, but how many men are you marginalizing by making it a campus initiative? That's not real men's issues to me. That's a campus issue. I mean, I'm not suggesting that men shouldn't get together with each other, but there's the issues they're bringing up aren't necessarily gender issues, but they're making it as such, and in that way I think they're really marginalizing a lot of social dynamics.
Like race, poverty,
right?
Say what major they're in, home life, do they have a single mom?
You're right. And you know what I should have done is I should have taken account of the ethnic makeup of the room, because that would be interesting as well.
The what?
The ethnic makeup of the room.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Personally, I just saw a lot of white men.
Yeah.
That's all I saw.
Yeah, I should though. I should go check it out. Yeah.
Well, I think it's very noble that you're addressing your concerns logically and looking into it, wanting to find statistics and analyze what you're hearing, and I think that's great. There are a lot of people who look at the men's rights movement, or even just an event like this, like a hate group, and don't want to hear it, would protest it, or just say hateful things about them. So I think it's great that you sat in for it and took notes and listened, and no matter what the outcome is of what you learned, even if you don't agree, at least you listened.
It's, I don't know. If they maybe elaborated on what their goals are, aside from, because if you're not a man and you're going to a men's issues group, immediately I think you're on the defense, because you're immediately excluded. So it's an antagonistic way to frame. It's an antagonistic from the get-go goal. Whether you're coming from it, as a female or as a male, and men can sense that too. Feminism is antagonistic because you're explicitly trying to redistribute the power. So it's hard not to get a reaction when you frame something as men's issues. 33% enrollment or 35% enrollment, whatever the number was. Let's take action. There need to be men's centers on campus. That's zero qualification for what men's issues are. But anyway, I think it's inherently antagonistic. So the reason security guards are here, I think that's entirely warranted. You send a flyer out, invite people, but it's an antagonistic message. And I think if they're really looking on equality, they should really maybe consider another approach in terms of public relations, because it's not inviting. It doesn't invite sympathy. It's a very antagonistic message.